Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a new conversation with Age in Spain. My name is Mark, and I'm the information specialist for Age in Spain. And today we will have a similar dynamic to the live events that we had previously. We will talk about residency, we will talk about how to get and to know if you are under the scope of the withdrawal agreement, what are the steps to follow. But we will also talk about other paths for residency outside of the scope of the withdrawal agreement. Just to go through a bit of the contents that we will have today, we will be talking about what's the scope of the withdrawal agreement, what are the known issues for people who is currently trying to access for residency under the scope of the withdrawal agreement, what are the requirements that are most problematic coming from the immigration office, and by the way, how to solve them as well. And then we will go through other paths of residency, such as the visa regimes, the Arrigo social, and I will be answering a bit the questions that will be appearing through the event. So if you're joining, if you have any questions, make sure to drop comments below, because I will be answering your questions during the event, and also by the end of it I will also take a look at the questions. If you have a personal case, something that you want to talk about, please let me know and I'll do my best to give you an answer. So first of all, what's the withdrawal agreement? It seems that for the past year and a half, since the project started, we started making live events. We've been talking about how someone can be under the scope of the withdrawal agreement, what are the exact requirements, why some people who seemingly lived in Spain during 2020 are having problems to apply for residency under this regime. And I will try to go over it, try to mention these issues that people is raising now that have been going on for a while, since January 2021. So what is the scope? What is this withdrawal agreement? In terms of immigration, this withdrawal agreement between the UK and the EU says that anyone, any UK national who lived, in this case in Spain, but it also applies to the rest of the EU, has the possibility to maintain their residency rights if they continue to live in Spain, and this means that they can obtain a card. This is what we call a tier, a UK specific tier, that reflects that the UK national is under the scope of the withdrawal agreement and has the requirements to access this residency card are very, very similar to the requirements that you previously needed to access the EU residency card, that green card or green A4 document that a lot of people has, and that by many channels it has been quite vocal that there was no need to exchange it. We will go over that as well. What happened to people that already had the EU residency card? These people could or maintain this green card or green A4 document, or they could also exchange that green document for this new tier. This new tier is a plastic card, it is biometric, so it contains way more information than your green card, and it is also an ID. You can use it as an ID for many different purposes, to enter Spain from another country, in your airport, etc., etc. So what is happening with people that has tried to apply for residency under the scope of the withdrawal agreement in 2021? There have been several cases. As you know, we had COVID happen in 2020, and that caused, for example, lack of appointments. People that had to sort out their documents were not being able to do so because there were literally no appointments to obtain a padrón certificate, to get your paperwork done, even to request your bank statements. And this delayed many residency processes that could not be started in 2020. So what did the immigration office, the Spanish immigration office, do? What they did is, you can still apply for residency in 2021 if you lived in Spain in 2020. And by living, it means no touristic visits, no temporary stays, no summer stays or winter stays. They mean living. It is your place of residence. You just didn't sort out your documents in time, or you didn't think about it, but you actually lived. So in this case, you can still apply in 2021, but on top of all the documents required to apply for this residency document, you also need to present proof of continued residency. So what this means? It means that from the period that you state in your residency application that you started living in Spain, so for example, let's imagine that you came in 2019 and you present a padrón from 2019, you present a rental contract that starts in 2019, you need to prove that from that time until the present, when you are sending in your documents, you have proof of continued residency, that you never left the country permanently or for more than 6 months, which is the maximum period that you are allowed to leave the country without losing your residency rights. On top of that, you need to comply with other requirements, such as having a healthcare cover for all the period that you stayed you lived in Spain, and you need to show, of course, the famous sufficient economic means that in the case for T applicants, it is about 5,500 euros, a bit more, at least in your bank account, or having a working or pre-contract with a company or Spanish business that will employ you. So let's start with the continued residency. What happened? What have been the main issues in this case? Well, many people, yes, they lived in 2020, they came even in December, and some of them had no problem applying for residency because they said, I came in December, here are my documents, they got an appointment in January, let's say, and everything was in order. However, people that has been actually living longer in Spain have had issues with these documents, because while it's very easy to get some documents that are less than a year old, if you came to live in December, November past year, if you say that you lived in Spain for, let's say, 3 years without any residency document, getting all those documents is way harder, even though your entitlement could be interpreted as more legitimate. And this is where the first problems have appeared, especially as the year 2021 went on and people started applying later and later. The immigration office has become way more strict with this requirement. Another requirement that has been quite problematic in some areas, especially in the Canary Islands, it is the healthcare coverage. People that applied for residency had to also show that they had healthcare cover at least after the first 90 days since they arrived to Spain. And many people actually didn't. The way the Spanish immigration office approaches this problematic, and in general residency applications, it is, yes, even though 2020 was the deadline to get your residency under the scope of the withdrawal agreement, you can still apply in 2021 because, of course, we had COVID. But you need to prove that you fulfilled all the legal conditions to become a resident back in 2020. And being covered, have a medical coverage, is one of the most important ones legally. And this applies to third country nationals such as UK nationals now, but it also applies to EU nationals that came to live with the EU green card. The issue that happened here is that because previously we were all EU nationals, there was a much less controlled environment, and now that UK nationals have to become more regular with the immigration office, well, this has become an issue. Ways to solve it? Well, first of all, the most obvious is if you had coverage, if you had a medical insurance, private medical insurance, you have no problem since the day you started, or at least after the first 90 days, because that's the period that you're allowed to live in Spain without any sort of residency. What's another solution? The Convenio Especial, which is Basically like a private insurance, but you get public healthcare. You pay a monthly fee to the Spanish social security system, and then you are accepted at hospitals, you're covered. And the good thing about this system is that there are no preconditions. They cannot deny you. So if you have a particularly difficult situation with your health, this is a very good way to go, because you won't be turned down or you won't be offered a very, very expensive plan. It's not a I wouldn't advise this for young people if they are perfectly healthy, because the base price of this plan is already a bit expensive, but it is quite attractive for older collectives. Another solution, well, if you were employed in Spain back in 2020, even if you didn't have residency, but you were receiving a salary and you still are, which now is more difficult because we are in late 2021, that meant that you were contributing towards the social security system. That means that you were already medically covered. So if you provide proof that you were employed from that period of time that you came to Spain until now, they should accept your residency application. Now, let's go over the sufficient economic means, which is something that has become somewhat less of an issue now compared with the healthcare and especially the continued residency. But it's still worth mentioning because there is not a single way you can fulfill this requirement. The most simple and obvious is just having money in your account, but not just any kind of money, but 5,500 euros, a bit more, depending on the region, but tops 5,700 euros, sorry. Another way, being employed, having a sustained source of income and being subscribed to the Spanish Social Security, it was also a possibility. Now it is more difficult because if you were not employed back in 2020, currently because of Brexit, you cannot work in Spain unless you have a working visa, unless you are a resident. So that now is more difficult. But if during 2020 you were employed and you now have some sort of commitment, a document proving commitment of your employer to keep you, you could use that to apply for residency. And of course, pensioners can also use their pension certificates. And by the way, I forgot, they can also use their S1 forms to prove both the sufficient economic means and the healthcare coverage. As you probably know, the S1 form is a document, it's a paper that any UK state pensioner can request to the NHS Overseas Healthcare Service and allows you to export the healthcare coverage that you would obtain in the UK because of you being a pensioner back into Spain. Basically, with that document, you get access to the Spanish healthcare system because of your pension. There is no more to it. So, and another thing that is worth mentioning is that pensioners that are under the scope of the withdrawal agreement can also access healthcare back in the UK for their temporary visits. This is part of the deal. This is not the same for any UK national who might become a resident of Spain in the future, not under the scope of the withdrawal agreement, but for example, with a visa regime. In this case, when you will export your healthcare with the S1 from the UK to Spain, you will lose access to that level of healthcare back in the UK. But you can still use a GHIC card and other sources to access for healthcare in the UK during your temporary visits. Now, I don't want to make a hiatus, but I see that we're already getting some viewers, so I really encourage you to leave comments today, to leave your questions. I will be addressing them both during the session and also at the end I will do a recap, so please do not hesitate. I'm here to help you. If you have a situation that is a bit complicated, I'm talking a bit general, so if you want more specifics, make sure to throw your questions in the comments and I will address them as soon as I can. Okay, so we've talked a bit about residency, we talked a bit about what we already new, which is the scope of the withdrawal agreement, some of the most known issues. But now it's important to talk also a bit about the reason of this Facebook Live event, which are other paths to residency. And first, we will talk about visa regimes. What is a visa? A visa can be understood as a sort of a ticket that you get in your home country that allows you to become a resident, in this case in Spain. Sometimes we think that a visa is already a residency permit, but it is more of an entry ticket towards the country that you want to work in, that you want to live in, when you are a third country national and there is not a bilateral agreement between your country and that country that allows you to permanently live there unquestioned. So in this case, visas would be for people that are not under the scope of the withdrawal agreement clearly, or those who, even though they thought they were, apparently because of how strict the immigration office has become, the path of the withdrawal agreement has become a bit unreachable for them. How do they work? Visas work in the following way. In your home country, you need to go to the consulate, you need to write to the consulate and present a set of documents. They will study your case, and depending on the visa that you're asking for and the documents that you send, they will evaluate if you fulfill those requirements and grant you the visa. This is the explanation bare bones. Now I will go more in depth, because first we need to know what type of visas there are. I won't go over all of them, but I will mention the most important, starting for the non-lucrative visa. What is a non-lucrative visa? A non-lucrative visa is a visa, sorry for being so redundant, that its target group are people that have resources and that want to retire to Spain without working. So how does it work? Basically, you will need to prove to the Spanish consular office in your region, the region of the country you live. Depending on the country, there might be several consular offices, so you need to take a look at that. But mostly here in UK, there are three, which are, if I'm not mistaken, Edinburgh, Manchester, and London. The non-lucrative visa is meant for people that wants to retire, that doesn't plan to work, and that have some life savings. Maybe they have a property, they want to retire to their summer house. And the way it works is presenting to the consular office those resources that you have, and then they will study the case and give you an approval. Now, how much money do you need to have, and how much does this process cost? You need to prove that you have at least, and this is a rough amount because every year it changes. Also, if you're applying from the US, let's say, this amount might be different, but in pounds we're talking around 25 to 30,000 pounds in savings. That would be one thing. And then the visa process, so the price of this visa that you will be requesting, is around 500 pounds. So it is a very expensive process, but what you gain with it? Once you obtain this visa, if you decide to go for it, you will have a ticket, a visa that will grant you entry to Spain, that will let you request a residency card, and that residency card will be valid for 1 year. You will be able to renew this card after the first year for 2 additional years, as long as you continue complying with the initial requirements of the visa. So basically, if your situation hasn't changed and you continue living in Spain, you can renew this visa ad infinitum. This visa can be renewed twice. So you have the first year, then you need to renew it for 2 more years, and after those 2 more years, you can renew it again. Once you reach 5 years with this visa, you will be able to change your temporary residency card to a permanent one, which will last for 10 years. And then you will become a permanent resident in Spain which will grant you access to the Spanish healthcare system without any requirements, which if you're living in islands, you will have access to discounts for travels by plane and by ship, because it is a program that exists in Spain. And this is how it works. You can also bring your family. Of course, if you bring dependents, you need to present additional resources to prove that you can sustain them on top of the basic requirements that are those 25,000-30,000 pounds for your initial application. This is the non-lucrative visa. It is not accessible to everyone. It is quite expensive, but it is not the only option that we have here. So, what are the other options? Well, first, another option that we have is the working visa. And this is, of course, aimed at people that plans to work in Spain, not just retire. It is way cheaper than the non-lucrative visa, but it has other complications, as you can imagine. First of all, in order to get the visa, this working visa for Spain, you need to have a Spanish employer that is ready to hire you. And this is not as easy as it sounds, because one of the things that we have in Spain, as you probably know, is unemployment. And what this means, that when a company plans to hire a foreigner, they are asked by the Spanish employment office to prove that they check that there isn't a Spanish job seeker that cannot cover that job offer. And they need to send a certificate, and then if the Spanish employment office agrees, then they can proceed to hire this foreigner. That is why this working visa, even though the wealth required to access to it is much less, you need this job offer, and it probably has to be a specialized job, a job that only only specialists can cover: engineers, IT positions, and of course English teachers will be also favored to get this visa. But it is a route that has become a bit more difficult, and it is very tied to the employment situation in Spain. The better it is in Spain, the more accessible this visa will become for foreigners. Another visa, and this one, it is also it does share some similarities with the non-lucrative visa that I explained before. It is what is famously known as the golden visa, and its official name is the real estate or investor visa. So what's this visa about? This visa, it is also targeted to the wealthy collective or to people that has some properties in Spain that wants to invest or that wants to buy Spanish public debt, which that's probably the minority. Here in this video, I will focus especially on the real estate one, because that's the most common, that's probably the most accessible one. And what it consists is, if you have a property in Spain, a property or several properties that have a cumulative value of over 500,000 euros, and you bought these properties after 2014, which is the year that the law regulating this visa came into fruition, then you can obtain a visa that will allow you to live and to work in Spain for as long as you hold these properties, this real estate property, your summer house, and they keep this value on the market. This visa offers a lot of advantages. You can probably imagine what the Spanish authorities were thinking when they offered this visa. They are looking at capital coming into Spain in many different forms, in real estate, but also in shares of Spanish companies, etc., etc., etc. And the biggest advantage of this visa is that, apart from allowing you to work, it allows you to leave the country for an indefinite amount of time without losing your residency permit. This means that you can hold your Spanish residency without needing to live in Spain. This is an option that might be attractive for some people, that has properties, that has a summer house, that has a certain value, and it is definitely the way to go if you have the resources for it. Okay, I see that we have some questions. Mandy Husky is sending a question. After a non-lucrative visa, can I get a working one, but don't have to work if I don't want to? Okay, Mandy. You can get a working permit after getting residency with a non-lucrative visa, but the way it works, it is, let's say that you came to Spain with the non-lucrative visa, and because of reasons, you stopped having the necessary resources to continue getting your non-lucrative permit. So let's say that something went bad, and all of a sudden you cannot fulfill anymore the conditions of the non-lucrative visa to renew your residency card after, let's say, the first year or the next two. In this case, if you present documents to the immigration office showing that this is the reason why you cannot anymore sustain yourself or fulfill these conditions, then you can request a working permit in order to continue sustaining yourself and being a resident in Spain. But you cannot just apply for a working permit if you still can sustain yourself, if you have the non-lucrative visa. What they will be looking for in the immigration office is that you cannot sustain yourself or your family, and only under those conditions they will give you this work permit. So it is not as easy as it might look. We have another question from Paul Wilkinson, and let's read. This is a bit of a long one. So, hello, could you please clarify something for me? I am a non-resident UK national. My wife is an EU non-resident. Okay, my wife is currently in the process of getting her residency and could possibly have it confirmed on the 28th of November. My question is, if I travel to and from the UK with my wife, does my 90-day restriction still apply? If I enter Spain at the same time as my wife, is my 90-day restriction ignored? Also, if I stayed here for a length of time, but during that time my wife goes to England and then back to Spain, does it affect my 90 days in some way? Okay. I think I will have to answer your question by parts. But as I understand, you are living in Spain, you are not a resident, you're a UK national, and your wife is an EU non-resident. I will assume that you're planning to live in Spain, and in this case, if she becomes a resident, let's say with the EU residency permit, then you can apply for residency as an EU family member. I don't know if I get this right. If not, please send me another message clarifying, but it is so long that it's a bit difficult to now on the way see exactly. What it is for sure is that this 90-day rule that you're talking about, it is for the Schengen area. So we're not talking just about Spain. If you come from the UK to Spain, you're entitled to 90 days of stay without a visa. But this is for Spain, this is for France, this is for all the EU. Once those 90 days are over, you can go back to the UK, but you will have to wait an additional 90 days before coming back. As you know, this 90-day rule is 90 days per 180 days. So if during the previous 180 days from the time they check your passport, you've been already 90 days in Spain, you won't be able to come again. That's how the 90-day rule works. Please feel free to send an additional question and I'll be happy to answer. Mandy Husky, you're continuing the conversation we started. If I still have funds but would like to work 1 or 2 days after my first year on a lucrative visa. No, sadly, Mandy, it is not possible. They would only change your non-lucrative permit for a working permit if you are having issues to sustain yourself and you can prove it to the immigration office. So Sadly, one of the things that Brexit has caused is not only residency being more difficult to get, but that UK nationals cannot work in Spain unless they have a work permit. And as you probably heard when I was explaining how to get the working permit, it is quite difficult because you need to be very qualified or cover some positions that are unable to be covered by Spanish workers. I see, Paul Wilkinson, you have another question. When I apply for my residency, I also heard that the 90 days is not an issue as well. Does that mean that I can come and go to England without restriction during an application period and I would need to show border authorities at time of entering Spain? Okay, I see what you mean. From age in Spain, we do never encourage people to leave Spain while they're applying. It is true that if you apply for residence in Spain, you are entitled to stay and live in Spain until you receive a resolution of your application. Positive or negative, it doesn't matter. During all the residency process, you are entitled to live in Spain no matter what. However, remember that while you're applying, you don't have a residency document. Okay, but you still have the stamp in your passport. So that means that if you go back to the UK and you pass the 90-day rule, even though you are having your residency process sorted, you are way over 90 days, you decide to come back, let's say for Christmas to the UK, for 5 days or 10, and then you come back to Spain. The border guard will look at your passport, will see the date of the stamps, and they will see that you don't have a residency document, and they might turn you off. They might turn you back to the UK. So if you're going through the residency process, I strongly advise against going to another country, even within the EU, because you might have problems. It is not very defined what can and can't be done in these circumstances. That's why we always tell to people to be as cautious as possible and just endure this period in Spain until you finally get your resolution. Once you get the resolution paper, that at least has your NIE number already in there. It says that you're a resident, and then you could argue with the border guards that you're a resident even though you still don't have the physical card. We have another question from Jean Rogerson. I hope I said the name right, which is, if I spend 30 days, how soon I can return and over what period can spend 90 days? Okay, so if you spend 30 days in Spain, you can come anytime because you still have 60 more to spend in the Schengen area. Okay, so in this case, it is not this 90-day rule, I can understand is a bit complicated, but you need to see it in the following way. Let's say that you take a look at your passport. You know that since Brexit, now when you come to Spain, at least that's how the theory says, because some people say that they are not having their passport stamped, but your passport should be stamped. And the stamps have a date on them. Every day, the date changes, so it shows when you enter and when you leave. By looking at your passport, the police in the airport can see how much time have you spent in Spain in the past 180 days. If they see that you spent 30, they will not stop you. You can come and go. But if they see that you've spent already 90 days in Spain, since in the last 180 days, they won't let you in. You need to look at your passport or look at your calendar and see how much time have you spent in Spain in the past 3 months, or sorry, yes, 180 days, and then be critical about it. And sorry, it's 6 months, not 3, my bad. And then if you are already surpassing that period, sadly you cannot come, because you risk to getting fined and even banned from coming to the Schengen area again. Usually it's just a fine, which ramps up depending on how much is your overstay. So I would advise being quite careful about it. Lynn Richardson Moy sends another question, which is, if a resident of Spain marries a UK resident, can the UK resident come and live and work in Spain? Short answer, Lynn, is yes. they can. But when you get married, that's not the end of the story. That's when the process begins, actually. So let's say that a UK resident, a UK national gets married to a Spanish national. Then that UK national has to apply for an EU family card. This EU family card is a bit different than the usual residency cards that probably you've seen. It's a bit more complicated, the process, although it is at the same time more straightforward because no one can question the marriage once it is done and once you present the marriage certificate. So after presenting some sufficient means and some basic paperwork, the UK national in this case will receive a card that will allow the UK national to live for 5 years in Spain and also to work. So it is a working permit effectively. That is an interesting option for any UK nationals who are married not only to Spanish but to EU nationals in general and have difficulties finding themselves under the scope of the withdrawal agreement. So definitely a way into the Spanish system. It is the EU family card. It seems that we have quite an active collective today, so thank you very much for coming. I will be linking to you our website, concretely our info guides. I will leave it in the comment section, so you can feel free to go and check them anytime. Those guides are created by us. We cover not only visa processes, but we cover just how to get an appointment to get your TA, the first part of the process, the second part. We talk about unemployment benefits if you became unemployed in Spain. We go through different benefits that you can access in Spain if you have a difficult situation or if a relative has a difficult situation. So make sure to check our website out because it provides a lot of insight to many questions that maybe I am unable to answer here, even though I'll try to do my best. Okay, so now coming back a bit to the explanation. We went over our golden visa, the famous golden visa. We went through the non-lucrative visa, through the working visa, and now I think it is time to go through the family reunification visa. What is this visa? This visa, as the name probably already implies, it is a visa that your relatives can apply for so they can meet with you in Spain. Let's say that you came to Spain to live in 2019. You got your residency under the scope of the withdrawal agreement, no problem at all, and you're working, you have a stable life in Spain. But for some reasons, because of job reasons, your wife, your kids, your parents are living back in the UK and you want to bring them to Spain. In this case, they can or apply as a family member, or with the case of relatives that are a bit more distant or that might not get the eligibility of this residency under the withdrawal agreement, they can apply for this family reunification visa and they will be able to come to live with you in Spain. So how does it work? There are different requirements depending on the type of family member. Something that I also forgot to mention is that this family reunification visa will be especially relevant in the future for UK nationals that are definitely not under the scope of the withdrawal agreement and that became residents of Spain with one of the visas that I previously mentioned. So let's go over about the requirements of this reunification visa. Let's start by the parents. If you want to bring in to Spain your father or mother, you must have, first of all, permanent residency, and they must be over 65 years old or have a condition or disability that requires you to take care of them. Of course, you will have to prove all of this to the consular office of the country they live in and to the immigration office. That's pretty much an obvious. And then there is a second requirement which might be linked to the first one or not, but they must be economically dependent to you. So seeing these two requirements, we're already seeing that this visa process is not very friendly because it targets, in the case of parents, very extreme situations, only if they cannot sustain themselves, if they have a disability and dependency. So it is quite difficult to bring in your parents with this guide. Now, if you want to bring in your spouse or partner, your spouse is, let's say, also a UK national, you met after you already became a resident in Spain, and you now want to live together in Spain. How can your partner do it? First of all, you must have a marriage or civil union certificate, so you need to be legal partners, and sufficient proof to show that it is not a marriage of convenience. Those requirements are from the consular office, not mine. So here is where the imagination comes into play in terms of how to prove that your marriage is not a convenience one. But I bet most couples will have everything necessary to do so. Normally, it is done by showing that you live together or that you used to live together, having testimonials, notaries, common bank accounts, savings accounts. The list can go on ad infinitum because the more you provide at the end of the day, the better. Another requirement is that I was going on to the requirements of the partner, and I forgot to tell a couple of things. You can also show census records, previous rental contracts, and as I said, savings accounts. This is the only requirement for partners, so the family reunification visa, it is especially accessible for this type of collective. And finally, the children. If you want to bring in your children to live with you in Spain, if they are not living in Spain, the conditions are the following. They must be under 18 years old or have some sort of physical dependency of you, let's say a disability, and so on. And of course, you will have to show a birth certificate showing your relationship with them. Pretty much obvious, as with children in any sort of residency application, you need to present that birth certificate, proof of kinship, to show that they are your child and that you're not bringing someone else's. So now we talked about the requirements for this visa, the basic requirements for each family member. Excuse me. And now we will go over about the process, because the process is also a bit different from other visa regimes. To starters, the process is started by the family member who lives in Spain. Okay, so the family member will have to present a set of documents to the immigration office, mainly the ones regarding the eligibility of their family members. So we talked about this: birth certificate, showing that you have resources to sustain them, etc., etc., etc. You present this to the immigration office, and then they will issue a resolution that you will have to send to your family members living back in the UK, and that paper, that document, will be presented to the consular office, and then they will do the process back there, and they will get the visa, and they will be able to come to Spain with that visa, get the residency card, and so on. I will link in the comments, because we have a guy covering extensively this topic, and since I know that some of you might find this interesting for your own use or to share with someone that might, here I leave it. Feel free to check it out. And if you have any questions, please throw at them. I see that Elaine has dropped a comment, so let's go over it. Hello. I started my residency process in February, but I was living here before the end of 2020. I was advised that I would be accepted, but I was rejected I only got my private insurance in February and went to the town hall then also in February. I have just been rejected again on appeal, and sorry I missed your comment, and I am now in the process of taking this to court in Madrid. Have you heard of anyone being accepted after going to court? Okay, so Elaine, being completely honest, appealing is quite a long process, as you probably already experienced. And no, since from Agent Spain we don't offer support for appeals because we're not qualified to do that, we haven't heard of cases that went to court. We've heard of appeals that had a resolution, an administrative resolution that was favorable, but sadly we're not aware of processes that went to court and that got a successful resolution at all. We don't know if positives or negatives, so sorry for not being able to answer. But what you're raising is a topic that we went through at the beginning of the session. And it is what happens if I've been living here since 2020, if Spain is my home, but somehow I cannot provide documentary proof of having healthcare, of continued residency, any of this. This is quite a difficult situation, Elaine. I will not lie to you. And the best you can do is try to get your policy as soon as you can. But looking at alternative paths for residency might be something that you will have to do or to start thinking about, because having healthcare is definitely necessary from the at least after the first 90 days since you started living in Spain. Now, if you say that you presented your residency application in February, or you got your health policy in February, and you came here to live before the end of 2020, if somehow you can prove to the immigration office that when you got your healthcare policy, you were still during those first 90 days, then you are not required to have a healthcare policy until February. And in this case, you could make your case successful in the appeal. So I wish you the best of luck, Elaine, and yeah, feel free to email Agent Spain if you have any particular questions about the healthcare insurance or what are the exact requirements, because sometimes people get insurances, but the insurances are not valid, which is another topic. Your insurance needs to be equal to the coverage provided by the Spanish social security system and have no sorts of co-payments or excess. So it is important to make sure that you're not just hiring a travel insurance or a limited insurance, etc., etc. So very important, the healthcare. It's been an issue, especially in the Canary Islands. We've received many inquiries raising up this. We raised this issue to the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. They are aware of it, but sadly, it is a very essential requirement from the Immigration Office, and there isn't much we can do. We can just advise people what are ways to overcome, look at their personal situation, work with this 90 days period of grace that you have when you just come to Spain, that you don't need health cover. So for anyone watching, keep in mind that health insurance is still very important to apply for residency. It's one of the essential requirements. So we've been over the family reunification visa, and now it might be time to talk a bit about another way of obtaining residency, which is what is known in Spanish as Arrigo. There are two ways of obtaining residency through this system. It is Arrigo social or laboral, and we won't go too extensively over it because in Agent Spain we're still working on having a comprehensive guide on those two processes. But long story short, it is for undocumented people. Let's say you came to Spain back in 2019, you've been living for several years, even had a job, but you never got your documents straight, you've been living here and there, and you do not have proof of continued residency. In this case, this Arrigo Social might be the alternative if you cannot afford a visa, if you're not under the scope of the withdrawal agreement because of how strict are the requirements currently. How does this Arrigo work? Arrigo in Spanish means to set your roots somewhere. And the way this process works is quite symbolical to this name, because you will need to prove to the Spanish immigration office that Spain has become your home. How does this work? You need to show that you are integrated not only in your direct community, but to show that you have a document provided by your town hall that is an integration certificate, we could say, that you have a job, that you have certain knowledge of the Spanish language, and also another requirement that is very important is that you have lived continuously in Spain for at least 3 years. As I said, we will be working on a guide on the Arrigo very soon, and we will share it in our social media, so make sure to stay tuned and do not lose this one. We have another message. This time comes from Christine Wisniewska. Sorry for butchering your Polish surname. So you say, I am British. My husband is Polish. If my husband becomes resident in Spain, will I be able to join him and be given residence in Spain? Yes, we already mentioned this before, but I have no problem going over it again. So as a UK national, if you are married with an EU national, it doesn't need to be Spanish. You can obtain your EU family card. This EU family card will give you a residence permit and a work permit, so you can live and work in Spain. The first residency card that you will get will last for 5 years, and after that you will have to renew it to a permanent one, which will be valid for 10 years and then it's subject to renewal. Something I forgot to mention about this permit is that if you're married with a non-Spanish EU national, in your case your husband is Polish, he will have first to obtain the Spanish residency before you can apply for the EU family card in Spain. That's a little detail that is not necessary if you're married to a Spanish national, because the Spanish nationals do not need to be resident. They are already Spanish nationals. But if you're married to another EU national, they need to get first their green card in Spain, and only then you can apply for the EU family card, not before. Something worth mentioning about the EU family card is that if you, let's say, you divorce in the future, the marriage doesn't go well, you part ways, or in case of death, you will keep your residency document regardless, because once you obtain residency, the residency in this case is sacred. You won't lose it. You will just have a normal residency permit after yours expires. We have another question from Tony Upton Brown. Hello, Tony, and welcome to the stream. You're sharing out. I see you're telling to Elaine Aitken that you're in a similar situation and you would like to chat. Okay, so I leave it back to you. You can send each other private messages then. Okay. So it's been quite a long stream today. I'm glad that everyone participated, and I think now it's already time to be closing this. So I have some news to share, and it is that our project, our residency helpline, will end the way it is by the end of this year. Our funding from the UK NSF, the UK National Support Fund, is ending, and therefore we won't be providing assistance for UK nationals that are under the scope of the withdrawal agreement from the 1st of January of 2022 onwards. This, however, does not apply to someone that might find themselves in a vulnerable situation because of residency, that have some sort of disability and need assistance. We will continue providing support to these collectives, but as a project, the residency helpline will come to an end by the 31st of December of 2021. With this said, I say goodbye to you. Feel free to send your queries through our inquiry form, call into our residency helpline. We're happy to answer and to look at your case if you're under the scope of the withdrawal agreement. Thank you for tuning in and have a nice evening. Goodbye.